Max wrinkled his nose as he leaned over the open crate, eyeing what could only be described as the crustiest pair of feet he had ever seen. "Dad, these are so weird," he muttered, poking at one of them with a pencil he'd found on the counter. "They're over 3,000 years old, Max," his father said, straining as he carefully lifted the box. "Weird is part of the job." Max took a step back as his dad carried the crate into his study, walking the way someone would carry a sleeping baby or a bomb. "Still creepy," Max called after him. "Like, what if the rest of him shows up looking for his feet?" He heard his dad chuckle, then the sound of the office door creaking shut. Max shook his head and wandered back into the kitchen. He grabbed a soda from the fridge and leaned against the counter, cracking it open with a satisfying hiss. "Oh, are we still going to that new mummy exhibit tomorrow?" he asked over his shoulder. "Yep," his dad called back. "Want you to see what my team's been working on." "Cool. Chloe can come, right?" "The more the merrier." Max hesitated, tapping his fingernail against the side of the can. "And maybe Kyle, too?" His dad reappeared in the doorway, raising one eyebrow in that way he always did when Max was pushing his luck. "The more the merrier," he repeated, a little slower this time. Max scoffed at his dad's sarcastic remark and pulled out his phone, thumbs flying across the screen. "Group chat and the Crypt crew. You guys are coming to the new mummy exhibit tomorrow. This isn't me asking, it's telling." Sent. He grinned to himself, imagining Kyle's inevitable string of dramatic complaints. Probably something about cursed tombs or the unnatural dryness of museums. Then, hesitating only for a second, Max opened a separate chat. "Chloe want to hang out tonight. Just you and I?" He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the send button. His heart thudded a little louder than usual. Things with Chloe had shifted lately. After years of low-key crushing from afar, something finally clicked near the end of their senior year. Shared jokes turned into lingering glances, and their texts had gotten a lot more flirty. Max hit send before he could overthink it. The message bubble disappeared, replaced by the 3 blinking dots of her reply. His breath caught. This could be the night. "Chloe, wait, never mind. I've got to study for this final. And I fear you might be more of a distraction than help, haha." Max stared at the screen, her message glowing up at him like a soft little heartbreak. He let out a sigh, the dramatic full-body kind, and flopped back onto his bed. Of course she had to study. Finals were important, responsible, smart. All things he liked about her. Until now. "Distraction," he muttered aloud, rolling the word around in his head. Was that flirty or a polite dodge? Probably both, which somehow made it worse. Still, he couldn't be mad. Chloe always knew how to keep it light, keep it kind. And if he was being honest with himself, he was the kind of guy who'd turn a study session into a movie marathon with snacks and zero academic value. He tossed his phone onto the pillow beside him and stared up at the ceiling. Tomorrow will be better. The exhibit, the energy, the mystery, he could impress her there. The museum smelled like old paper, dust, and something Max could only describe as ancient air conditioning. He adjusted his hoodie, shoved his hands into his pockets, and trailed behind his dad through the exhibit's entrance archway, 2 stone columns carved to look like jackals holding ankhs. "Welcome to the Hall of the Undying," read a sign above them in dramatic gold lettering. "Bit much," Max muttered. "Max!" Chloe's voice cut through the musty air, bright and easy. She jogged up, ponytail bouncing, wearing a cropped black tee with an ankh necklace that felt a little too on theme. Max's brain short-circuited for half a second. "Oh, hey," he said, way too casual, his heart doing jumping jacks. "You look exhibit ready," she smirked. Thanks." Kyle trailed behind her, dragging his feet like the undead. "This place smells like sarcophagus ass," he groaned, waving his hand dramatically. Max's dad, overhearing, looked like he wanted to lecture, but settled for a tight-lipped smile and gestured toward the central gallery. "This is the real prize," he said, his voice shifting into tour guide mode. "We call him Ra-Amun-Tef, believed to be a high priest or minor prince, undisturbed for over 3,000 years. Until now." The mummy lay in a sealed glass case, wrapped in linen so delicate. Its golden funerary mask gleamed under the exhibit lights, eyes like 2 frozen suns staring straight through the glass. "Creepy," Chloe whispered beside Max. He nodded in agreement, though a part of him didn't really agree. It was creepy, but also kind of awesome. The idea that this guy had lived, ruled, maybe cursed a few tombs, and now lay here in this glass box with people sipping iced coffees and snapping selfies a few feet away. It was surreal. The trio moved along with the slow shuffle of other visitors, weaving through golden sarcophagi, scarabs sealed in resin, and ancient texts that looked like they'd crumble if someone exhaled too hard. But not before Max glanced back at the mummy one last time. Ra-Amun-Tef's golden mask caught the light again, and for a second, Max imagined he could feel that stare-hot and ancient burning straight through the glass. He blinked. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. The storm raged outside, lightning flashing across the sky like cracks in the darkness. Inside Max's living room, the glow from the TV danced over their faces as the group lounged on the couch. "You think this storm is like end-of-the-world level?" Kyle asked, half joking as thunder cracked so loud it rattled the window panes. "I mean, ancient tombs, freak lightning, ominous vibes. Yeah, seems chill," Chloe teased, tossing a handful of popcorn at him. Max smirked but said nothing. His mind had drifted back to that mummy. Something about it had clung to him. The name, the eyes, the weird energy in the air. Another boom shook the house, followed by a distant crash somewhere in the direction of the museum. "Okay, that sounded close," Kyle muttered, standing up and stretching. "I should head out before the roads flood." "You sure you can crash here?" Max offered. Nah, I got a date with an Xbox and a microwave burrito." With that, Kyle was gone, leaving Max and Chloe alone. The air shifted. Chloe curled her legs under her, still on the couch. "So, where were we before all the end-of-days thunder?" Max smiled nervously. "You were telling me I was a distraction." "I stand by that." She scooted a little closer. "But maybe. I don't mind distractions tonight." Max's heart pounded. As she leaned in, lightning flashed, lighting her eyes, and just as their lips were about to meet, beep! 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 The house alarm shrieked through the quiet. Max bolted upright. "What the hell?" He ran to the hallway monitor. Chloe followed, clutching his arm. On the grainy screen, a figure stood drenched in the storm, staring directly into the camera. He looked normal. Young, maybe early 20s, shirtless, barefoot, wrapped in some kind of ancient cloth, and absolutely out of place. Max flipped on the intercom. "Dude, who are you?" The man smiled calmly. "I am Ra-Amun-Tef, born of Anubis and the sun." Chloe blinked. "Okay, what?" "I have awakened to reclaim what is mine. Your father brought me here. You watched me in my tomb. Now I walk among you." "Right," Max muttered. "You're soaked, half-naked, and trespassing. Congrats. If you do not believe me, check your father's study. The crate where he placed my sacred feet gone." Max hesitated. Chloe whispered, "We did see the feet yesterday." They ran to the study. The crate sat open. Empty. Chloe's face paled. "Okay, that's weird." But Max frowned. "It still doesn't prove he's the mummy." Back at the monitor, Ra-Amun-Tef raised a hand, palm out. With a strange muttered phrase, the backyard sprinklers erupted in flames, water igniting into fire. Max and Chloe stared in stunned silence. "Okay," Max said quietly. "That's new." Ra-Amun-Tef smiled calmly. "Invite me in, or I shall find my way." "Well, okay," Max said, reaching for the door handle. Chloe immediately smacked his arm. "Ow," Max winced. "What the hell, Max?" Chloe hissed, eyes wide. "He seems like a nice enough dude," Max muttered, rubbing his arm. Chloe gave him a look. He also just referred to finding his way in. That's like classic creepy villain speak. Max shrugged. "Yeah, but he's wearing linen and eyeliner. I'm pretty sure we can take him." Chloe didn't look convinced. "Whatever," Max mumbled, turning the knob. The door creaked open and Ra-Amun-Tef stepped inside slowly like he was royalty entering a throne room. His eyes scanned the room, family photos, cluttered shoes by the door, and a lingering scent of microwave popcorn. Ra-Amun-Tef stepped inside with exaggerated grace, scanning the room like a king inspecting his kingdom. "Charming," he said, running his fingers over a lava lamp. "A palace of light and mystery." Max shut the door behind him. "Yeah, that's from Spencer's Gifts." Ra-Amun-Tef turned, his gaze landing on Chloe. He blinked slowly, then took a dramatic step toward her. "You," he said, voice deep and smooth. "You wear the scent of figs and lightning." Chloe blinked. It's vanilla body spray." He stepped closer. "It intoxicates me. You must be goddess of the harvest?" Max stepped between them. "Okay, Romeo of the Reeds, let's back it up." Ra-Amun-Tef raised his hands. "I mean, no offense. It is my nature to revere beauty. In my time, I had 14 wives and a small harem of poets who sang about my cheekbones," Chloe snorted. "I bet you were humble, too." "I invented humble," Ra-Amun-Tef replied proudly, then turned to Max. "Do you have food? I'm starving." Max led Ra-Amun-Tef into the kitchen, still unsure whether he'd just let a resurrected mummy or a very committed method actor into his home. Ra-Amun-Tef opened the fridge with a dramatic flourish, then hissed. What is this cursed box of winter air?" Max scratched his head. "It's a fridge, to keep food cold." Ra-Amun-Tef slowly reached inside and grabbed a can of whipped cream. He examined it like it was a sacred relic. "Is this royal elixir?" he asked before spraying it directly into his mouth. His eyes widened. "By the gods, I can taste joy." Chloe leaned on the counter. Okay, dessert break over. How do we know you're really a mummy and not like a really weird European exchange student? Ra-Amun-Tef gave a low, amused laugh. You doubt me still? He turned his palm upward. The lights above flickered once, then again. A gust of wind whipped through the closed windows. The shadows in the corner of the room stretched just slightly longer than they should have. Chloe's smile faltered. Max stepped back. All right, neat party trick. Can you, not mess with our lights? My dad already thinks I blow fuses playing Xbox. Ra-Amun-Tef's grin returned. Forgive me. Sometimes the dead remember more than they should. He suddenly leaned toward Chloe. But do not fear. I would never harm a goddess. Chloe gave him a side-eye. Right, I'm totally comforted. Ra-Amun-Tef looked down at the whipped cream. May I keep this sacred scroll of cream? Max shrugged. Sure, knock yourself out. Over the next 2 weeks, Ra-Amun-Tef became part of the family. He had his own room, decorated with blackout curtains and an unreasonable number of candles. He joined family dinners, big fan of lasagna, and somehow even got along weirdly well with Max's dad, who decided an immortal guest was just part of working in artifacts. Ra even integrated into Max's friend group, quickly earning Kyle's respect with weirdly insightful FIFA strategies and ancient war metaphors. But something felt off. Max couldn't help but notice the way Ra's hand always lingered a little too long on Chloe's shoulder, or how he always seemed to be sitting closer to her than anyone else. Then came the moment. They were all hanging out in Max's living room, half watching a movie, half scrolling on their phones, when Ra cleared his throat. I wish to take Chloe to the Moonlight Arcade this Friday, he said casually, like he wasn't detonating a social grenade. Max's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. Wait, what? Chloe blinked. Even Kyle looked up from his phone. Ra smiled serenely. A courtship ritual, yes? You duel at basketball machines and win glowing tokens of affection. I would like that. Chloe's mouth opened and closed like her brain buffer was lagging. Max's soda cup slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thunk. She glanced at Max, wide-eyed. Everyone stared. Sure, Chloe finally said. But it came out like a question someone asks when they're being held at spear point. Max gave a hollow laugh. Cool. Ra nodded. Excellent. I shall win you a neon bear of considerable size. Max shot Kyle a look. Kyle mouthed, dude, and silently sipped his drink. Kyle stood up abruptly. All right, I'm out. You three figure out whatever this is. He grabbed his jacket and was gone. That left Max, Chloe, and Ra. Ra brushed a non-existent speck of dust from his shirt. I do find myself tired and shall retire to my chambers. He stepped toward Chloe, took her hand with a dramatic flourish, and kissed it gently. Sleep well, my desert flower. Chloe blinked. Night. With that, Ra turned and left the room, robes swishing with flair. Max stared at the doorway for a beat before whipping around to Chloe. What the hell was that? Chloe threw her hands up. I literally didn't know what to say, Max. Max scoffed and turned away. Seriously? Oh, come on, she said. You haven't even asked me out. We keep dancing around whatever this is, and now... Max turned to her, heart pounding. Then let's stop dancing around it. He stepped forward, closing the space between them. His hand slid to her waist, then up her back, hesitating just for a moment before brushing her cheeks. I like you, Chloe. I always have. Please, cancel your date with the ancient magical homewrecker. She chuckled for half a second, then whispered, Deal. And then she kissed him, slow and soft at first, like she meant to make sure it was real. Then her fingers threaded into his hair and the kiss deepened. In the hallway, unseen, Ra watched from a shadow. His eyes glinted. Max and Chloe stood there for a beat, lips still tingling from the kiss, both slightly breathless. For once, the world outside felt quiet. No Ra, no Kyle, no museum relics humming with cursed energy. Just them. Max smiled, a little dazed. So, does this mean I can officially take you out? Like, not sandwiched between Kyle's weird jokes and Ra's pharaoh monologues? Chloe laughed, leaning her forehead against his. Yeah, I'd like that. No mummies, just us. He pulled her onto the couch with him, her legs draping over his lap. They sat like that, tangled and comfortable, the TV quietly playing reruns in the background while they whispered to each other about nothing and everything. For a little while, it was easy to forget there was a literal ancient entity sleeping just down the hall. Max brushed a strand of hair from her face. You know, I really thought I lost my shot. Well, Chloe grinned. You kind of did, to a reanimated corpse. Max laughed. Yeah, thanks for the ego boost. She kissed him again, slower this time. But you got it back. Just then, the TV screen flickered, just for a second. The lights dimmed and hummed. Later that night, Max woke to the sound of chanting. He sat up, heart pounding. The sound was coming from the study, A low hum like the air itself was vibrating. He crept down the hallway. Ra's room was empty. Chloe's guest room was too. Then he saw the glowing light under the study door. He flung it open. Ra stood in front of the ancient mirror artifact, dressed in ceremonial linen robes. A gold headdress tilted on his head. Chloe was beside him, unconscious, wrapped in silk, hovering above a circle of sand and symbols drawn across the floor. "What are you doing?" Max shouted. Ra turned slowly, his face oddly serene. "I've had enough of this age. It is time I return home with my queen." "She's not your queen," Ra smiled. "She will be." He raised the golden staff from the museum, and the mirror pulsed with ancient light. Max lunged forward. Too late. A flash like a sun exploding, and Ra and Chloe vanished. Max stared at the faintly glowing mirror, still catching his breath. His thoughts were racing. "Did my brand new girlfriend just get taken by a mummy?" he muttered to no one in particular, whipping out his phone. He dialed fast. "Kyle, get your ass over here. Now!" Kyle arrived minutes later, barely winded, but looking like he'd sprinted the entire way. Max met him at the door, grabbed his arm, and practically dragged him to the study. That pussy," Max said, jabbing a finger at the shimmering surface of the mirror, "just stole my girlfriend, and time-traveled back to ancient Egypt." Kyle blinked. "Wait, hold up. Girlfriend?" Max paused, looked at the floor for a second, and then grinned like an idiot. "I know, Kyle cracked a huge grin and pointed at him. "Oh, my man." They both did a dumb little victory shake, but the moment quickly passed as Max's expression turned serious again. Okay, focus," he said, rubbing his temples. We need to follow them, but I have no idea what's on the other side of that mirror. We need a plan. We need weapons. We need, I don't know, like mummy repellent or something." "I've got a baseball bat and a taser in my trunk," Kyle offered. Max's eyes lit up. "Perfect. And fruit snacks. Even better." Kyle turned to head back outside, but not before tossing a glance at the mirror. "We're actually doing this?" Max nodded. "We're going to save Chloe and bring her home." "Then let's go." They leapt through the mirror. Splat! Warm sand greeted their faces, and their landing was anything but graceful. "That was less than majestic," Kyle groaned, pushing himself up and spitting out a mouthful of grit. "I'm very glad Chloe wasn't here to see that," Max muttered, brushing sand from his shirt and hair. Kyle rolled onto his back, staring up at the blindingly blue sky. The air was hot, dry, and smelled faintly of spice and dust. So, ancient Egypt, huh? Max stood and offered Kyle a hand. "Sure looks like it." They both turned slowly, taking in the vast, sun-bleached desert around them. In the distance, rising like a mirage, stood a colossal palace flanked by tall date palms and obelisks glinting gold in the sunlight. "Well, where to?" Kyle asked, squinting under the sun. Max pointed. "I'm going to go ahead and assume the massive palace over yonder." Kyle nodded, brushing sand off his knees. "Yeah, that checks." They began walking toward the towering structure, their shadows long behind them. Somewhere in that palace, Chloe was being wooed by a narcissistic, power-hungry, undead prince. "Let's hope she's not wearing linen and eyeliner by the time we get there," Kyle muttered. They started toward the palace, their sandals crunching over the sand, heat waves dancing in the distance. "I don't think I'd mind the eyeliner," Max said after a beat. Kyle gave him a slow side-eye. "What?" "Or the linen, for that matter," Max added with a shrug. Kyle groaned and rolled his eyes. Meanwhile, in the heart of the palace, Chloe stood at the edge of a grand balcony, overlooking a sea of people. Thousands of voices rose in unison, chanting a name she now knew too well. "Ra-Amun-Tef! Ra-Amun-Tef!" Their words thundered through the air, rhythmic and wild, though she couldn't understand the language. It wrapped around her like a storm, vibrating in her chest. Despite the heat, she shivered. She looked down at her hands, adorned in golden cuffs and rings, far too ornate to be hers. Her modern clothes had been replaced with soft, sheer linen, and her hair was braided in unfamiliar patterns. The crowd didn't know her, but they cheered for her too, Ra's queen, his prize. She felt like a doll placed on a throne she hadn't asked for. Behind her, the heavy door creaked open. Footsteps approached. "Isn't it magnificent?" Ra's voice purred, warm and terrifying. Chloe didn't turn to look. "This isn't real." "It's more than real," he said. "It's eternal." Ra stepped closer, the soft jingle of his gilded robes brushing the marble floor. "You were born in the wrong time, Chloe. That world, it dulls your fire. Here, you shine." She finally turned to face him. He was fully adorned, now kohl-lined eyes, gold collar plate glinting in the sunlight, and a confidence so complete it felt ancient. "You kidnapped me," she said through gritted teeth. Ra tilted his head. "No, I freed you. You are to be my queen, my equal. I will build you a temple." "I don't want a temple," she snapped. "I want home. I want Max." At the mention of Max, Ra's gaze darkened. "He is a distraction, a child pretending to be a man. I have ruled empires. I can give you eternity." She stepped back, heart pounding. "You can't force me to love you." Ra's face softened dangerously. "Not yet." Ra's eyes glowed faintly as his voice melted into a steady rhythm, ancient syllables tumbling like warm honey. The air between them grew thick, as if soaked in incense and something far older. Chloe's breath hitched. Her spine straightened, her jaw relaxed. "Feel different about it now?" he asked, his voice a velvet thread wrapping around her mind. Chloe blinked slowly, her pupils slightly dilated. "Certainly," she murmured, gazing into his eyes like they held the answers to the universe. Ra smiled, almost tenderly. "No, good. The gods favor clarity." Somewhere deep inside her, a quiet scream echoed, but it felt miles away. Back in the desert, Max and Kyle trudged toward the towering palace in the distance. Sweat clung to their foreheads, and their sneakers left awkward prints in the sand. "Are we there yet?" Kyle muttered, voice thick with sarcasm. Max shot him a look. "I don't have the patience for your commentary right now." "But yes, clearly." He motioned to the bustling, ancient city now looming ahead, alive with movement and the clang of metal. They paused at the city's edge, eyes scanning the crowds. Max looked down at his jeans, then over to Kyle's hoodie, then back to himself. "Bro, we stick out like sore thumbs?" Kyle wiped his brow and groaned. Well, what do you suggest we do? Join a toga party?" Max squinted toward the palace walls. 2 guards, clad in linen and leather, spears in hand, were patrolling the perimeter. "I have an idea," Max said slowly, a grin creeping across his face. Kyle immediately took a step back. No, he said flatly. "Yes," Max shot back, already rolling up his sleeves. Kyle frowned. "You're out of your mind," Max smirked, motioning for Kyle to follow. He crouched low and darted behind a nearby stack of wooden crates, peeking over the top like a spy in a very ill-planned heist. Kyle reluctantly joined him. "This is so dumb." "You brought the taser, right?" Kyle hesitated, then pulled it from his waistband with a deadpan expression. "Yeah, unfortunately." Max grinned. "Amazing." Then, without warning, "Now!" Max sprang up like a caffeine-addled squirrel and launched himself at the first guard. The man barely had time to grunt before Max had tackled him to the ground in a flurry of flailing limbs and very untrained wrestling moves. "Ugh," Kyle groaned, muttering something about therapy bills, as he hurried over and jabbed the second guard with the taser. The device crackled, the guard convulsed, and then collapsed to the sand with a dull thud. "Nice," Max said breathlessly, pinning his guy down with one knee. "That actually worked." Kyle wiped his brow and stared at the unconscious guards. "I can't believe I just committed an ancient assault." "We're time travelers. It doesn't count," Max replied, already yanking the tunic off the man beneath him. "Now hurry up, we've got a girlfriend to rescue." They weaved through the maze of sun-baked alleyways, ducking under laundry lines and dodging curious glances. Somehow, miraculously, they had made it to the palace steps. The sandstone fortress loomed above them, flanked by towering statues and guarded gates. Kyle adjusted his helmet, which continued to slip forward like it was trying to blind him. "I feel like we're one sneeze away from being executed," Kyle muttered. "Just act like you belong," Max replied through clenched teeth. Inside, the palace was cooler but no less intimidating. Gilded columns lined the marble halls, and robed attendants bustled past without a glance. They moved briskly, trying to blend in despite their mismatched uniforms and awkward strut. "Halt!" a booming voice echoed through the corridor. They froze. An official-looking guard with a crest on his chest and judgment in his eyes strode toward them. Max and Kyle slowly turned, trying to keep their panic beneath the surface. "Hi!" Kyle said, his voice dropping into a gravelly, clearly fake register. The guard narrowed his eyes. "No, why aren't you at your post?" Kyle's brain worked at lightning speed. "Bathroom break," he answered confidently, as if that were the most logical explanation in the world. The guard blinked. He looked them both up and down, clearly suspicious. "Then return, now." "Yes, sir," Max said, throwing in a salute that might have belonged to the Boy Scouts. The guard strode away. Once he was out of earshot, Max exhaled deeply. "We are so dead." "Not yet," Kyle replied. "But we're definitely running on borrowed time." They pressed forward, the sounds of the palace growing louder, music, voices, and above all, Ra's name being chanted from somewhere deep within the stone walls. The boys crept along the palace corridor until they reached a wide opening, an ornate archway that led into a grand ceremonial hall. Max peeked through first, eyes narrowing. There at the center of it all was Chloe. Draped in regal fabrics, adorned with jewels, she stood beside Ra-Amun-Tef beneath a towering stone arch, etched with hieroglyphs. Dozens of attendees knelt before them, chanting and bowing. Max's stomach turned. "Dude, is this a wedding?" Kyle peered around him, blinking. "Looks like one." They ducked behind a massive clay urn, whispering in hushed tones. "Why is she going along with this? Chloe's not the silent bride type." "She once slapped a guy in the cafeteria for calling her cute," Max whispered. Kyle shrugged. Maybe he enchanted her, or brainwashed her with that sexy ancient Egyptian confidence. Max shot him a look. "Not the time, man." Kyle held up his hands. "Just saying. We need a plan before they say, 'I do,' or whatever their version of that is." Max clenched his jaw as he looked back at Chloe. Her expression was dreamy, distant, like she wasn't entirely there. Something was wrong. The boys pushed their way to the front of the ceremonial crowd, ignoring the gasps and whispers. Max cupped his hands around his mouth. "Psst, Chloe." She turned, her eyes vacant. No spark of recognition, no smile, just a blank stare. Ra-Amun-Tef's arm slipped protectively around her waist. "Nice try," he said, his voice smooth and mocking. "She belongs to me now." His eyes flickered an eerie golden hue, ancient power pulsing beneath them. Max cringed. "Okay, you." Then, without another word, he lunged forward and grabbed Chloe's hand. "Excuse you?" Ra growled. Kyle sprang into action, tackling Ra back with a dramatic grunt. "Sucks being tackled in a tunic, doesn't it?" he shouted as they hit the ground. Max didn't flinch. His and Chloe's faces were inches apart now. "Hey," he whispered, gently placing his hand on her cheek. She blinked, confusion flashing across her face. Then he kissed her. A deep, determined kiss, infused with every shared laugh, every inside joke, every brush of fingers. There was a soft shimmer around them, barely visible, like heat waves rising off the desert. Chloe gasped, pulling back. "Max?" "Yeah," he grinned. "It's me." She looked around, stunned. What the hell's happening? Ra-Amun-Tef let out a roar from behind them, shoving Kyle aside and rising to his feet. His eyes were blazing now. "Okay, time to go," Kyle shouted, grabbing Chloe's other arm. "The mirror!" "Where's the damn mirror?" "Run!" Max shouted as the crowd erupted into chaos. They shoved their way through the crowd, dodging elbows and shouting bystanders. "Where's the mirror?" Kyle yelled, nearly tripping over a basket of dates. "Excellent question!" Max barked, scanning the palace halls as they sprinted. "You mean to tell me you two bumbling idiots didn't bring it with you?" Chloe snapped. "Well, to be fair, the mirror sort of plopped us into the desert," Max said between gulps of air. "We didn't exactly get a user manual." "Wait, then we have to find it here," he added suddenly, skidding to a stop. "Huh?" said Chloe and Kyle in perfect unison. "The mirror, it's an artifact, right? If we jumped through it in the future, it must exist here, in this palace. That's our ticket back." The trio bolted down another corridor, Ra thundering after them, his footsteps unnervingly light for a man in sandals. "He's fast," Kyle said, ducking as a spear whizzed overhead. "Do you think the guyliner gives him powers?" Max wheezed. "Focus!" Chloe snapped, but even she let out a breathless laugh. "There," she pointed. A faint glow shimmered at the end of a hall familiar in silver, humming with otherworldly energy. Kyle didn't wait. He dove headfirst. Chloe followed, turning mid-leap to grab Max's hand. But Ra caught him first. "You do not deserve her," the Mummy King snarled, spinning Max to face him. Max's heart pounded, but he grinned anyway. "I'm sorry, man. Chloe prefers dudes with a pulse." He drove a knee into Ra's stomach, tore the linen loose, and leapt. Just as his fingers grazed the glass, he heard Ross scream behind him. Then wham! He landed hard on the wooden floor of his dad's study, nearly face-planting into the carpet. "Max!" Chloe cried. Without hesitating, Max spun and smashed the mirror with the nearest thing he could find. A bronze statuette of Bastet. The glass shattered. The hum stopped. The room fell silent. "Okay," Max panted, sprawled on the floor. "So I vote no more cursed field trips." Kyle raised a shaky hand. "Agreed." Chloe, still draped in ornate bridal linens and glittering gold, leaned down and kissed Max. He was breathless, dazed, and slightly in awe. "Phew," Kyle muttered, shielding his eyes. "Can we not do this while I'm still recovering from near-death time travel?" Max grinned against her lips. "Jealous," Kyle scoffed, "of being almost married off to a jealous, undead pharaoh?" "Yeah, super jealous." Chloe laughed, straightening up and tossing a golden veil over Kyle's head. "You'd look great in this, honestly." He blinked. "If either of you posts this on Instagram, I swear to..." Too late, Max said, holding up his phone.